Unpopular trading opinion, but I believe that timing is more important than direction. I know that everyone is obsessed with wanting to know what direction the market's going to move in, but to be honest with you, most people, even beginner traders, can actually figure this out fairly easily by looking at the trend on the higher time frame. But it's that exact precision of entry and entering at the right point so that you don't get stopped out on volatility, which makes a big difference. On the US30, the New York session's actually pretty long. It's several hours. And usually there's only around 2 tradable moves in the whole session. So the rest of that is just chop and chaos. And if you take too many attempts to get in when it's untradable, you end up taking a lot of unnecessary losses. Imagine if you could strategically time your trading day so that you are only around and you are only really looking for trading opportunities when the market was offering good opportunities. It would make your life so much easier, right? So in this video, I'm going to talk you through the key times of the trading day for the US30. If you're excited to learn, hit the thumbs up button before we get started. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to Thinkmarkets now as well.
So the times that we're going to look at are London, which is actually the previous session, but it all starts there. We're then going to look at the New York killzone. So that's the time before the open. And this also includes pre-market open news. We're going to then look at the open. We're going to look at half an hour after the open. We're going to look at New York lunchtime, the second big push in the New York session, so the New York PM time. We're going to look at the close and also the post-market news. So how I tend to think about the New York session when I'm trading the US30 is that there tends to be around 2 big tradable moves. By tradable move, I mean that when I'm looking on the 1-minute chart or small time frames, the candles are mainly the same color. They're moving smoothly and with momentum in more or less the same direction. Obviously, you're going to get small pullbacks, but you want to see a very smooth and clean, nice tradable move. So for example, can you see how this downtrend here was much smoother than any of the trends that have happened since then, which means that if you were looking at trading at this time, from around here to around here would have been a nice sell position, whereas anything in this point here would have been impossible to get into whether you were in a buy or a sell. It really wasn't going in any direction. The candles are a different color, each candle, and it's ultimately moving sideways, which makes it completely pointless. And even sometimes when it moves in a direction, so say for example it's moving up, if it's untradable, I think of that as still being a different colored candle, each candle, and it moving very choppily. The pullbacks are larger than a reasonable stop loss would be, and it would be impossible to get a good risk to reward ratio. So ultimately, there's usually around 2 tradable moves in the New York session on the US30. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 1, changes every day. And also, they're at a different time every single day, which makes it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more difficult. But there are clues that you can look for along the way. And if you understand the key times of day that we're going to be going over in this video, it's going to make your life so much easier and help to give you a bit of clarity and help you to structure your day strategically. So it all starts in the London session, the previous session. So what I'm looking for in the London session, I'm not actually looking to take a trade, but what I'm looking at is how the market's behaved. If the market has made a nice big trend in the London session, then I know that the New York Open itself is more likely to be difficult. It's more likely to be chaotic. So kind of like this, it's more likely to take a while to sort itself out. And therefore, I won't be looking for any trade immediately after the open if there was a nice long trend in London. So I will always measure the move in London. If it's more than 200 points in one direction, then I will wait until later on in the New York session to look for a move. What I would like to see in the London session is very small candles moving sideways in almost like a small little box. So very similar to this sort of move here. Very, very small candles moving sideways. And then often you're more likely to get a nice move closer to the open if you see that in London. So it all starts in the previous session. The New York kill zone is the time before New York opens, and it includes the pre-market news. So I'm in the UK. So in UK time, that's from around 1:30 in the afternoon. Often the news comes out at 1:30, pre-planned news comes out then, and you can start to see a little bit of a reaction from the market. So again, I don't actually trade at this time, but I use that information to help me decide what might happen later on. Also in the pre-market news, sometimes you get earnings reports, and earnings reports are really useful for the US30 because the US30 is made up of 30 of the top companies in the US, and every quarter, each one of those companies releases their earnings report. So if an earnings report has come out before the market's opened, then you'll want to be looking at this in the kill zone, and that can give you clues as to how the day is going to unfold. We also have post-market earnings, which I'll get into later on in this video. So the open is a really key time of day when you're trading the US30. The open of New York is at 9:30 Eastern time, which is 2:30 p.m. UK time. So often you'll find that it's fairly slow leading up to the open, and then it all kicks off at 2:30 and you start to see lots of volume coming into the market. So sometimes the market on open has a really nice tradable move, but it's not every day. So you want to be looking for clues in your pre-market checks to decide as to whether you think it's going to be on the open or if it's going to be a little bit later than the open. So clues to look out for is the previous session, like we just mentioned. And also you want to look for whether the news is all in alignment. If a lot of heavy news came out before the open and it was all suggesting it might be in the same direction, and that direction also aligns with your daily price action and your daily momentum, then you've got a higher chance of there being a nice tradable move directly off the back of the open. However, if everything's out of alignment, if the daily momentum and the daily price action look a bit indecisive, and the news all came out a mix of bullish and bearish, then you're more likely to get a chaotic open. And that's because traders don't know what direction they want to go in. So it comes out very indecisive on the open. Often it will settle later on, and you might get your big tradable move, but it will just happen a little bit later. So the more indecisive all of your pre-market checks are before the open, the more likely you are to get that tradable move a little bit later on in the trading day. So the next key time of day is 3 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time. This is half an hour after the open, and it's a really key time of day if you're trading the US30. So often, if you've had a chaotic open and you haven't had a nice tradable move from the open, you might start to see a bit of volume coming into the market half an hour after the open. Sometimes it's exactly half an hour after, and sometimes it's give or take a few minutes, but you want to be really aware of that time of day, especially if the market is approaching a key level. Around 11:30 Eastern time, which is around 4:30 UK time, you'll often see that the market will slow down and consolidate as it pauses for New York lunchtime. This is often a very, very difficult time to trade. So I would always suggest that you take a break and avoid looking for setups whilst New York is on lunch. And that's because often you will see a lot of false entries and a lot of false signals during this time. So it's actually safer to not trade it altogether and to come back later. Often there's a big move in the second part of the session. That's usually around 6:30 UK time, which is around 1:30 Eastern time. And again, completely different time every single day to keep things interesting and difficult, but it's around that time. So between 4:30 and 5:30 UK time is usually safe to have a little bit of a break and just avoid trading altogether and be aware that there will be a lot of false signals in that time. It does tend to be a little bit quieter once you've had that second big move. So usually I would say if I've seen two big moves, whether I've been in them or not, if I've seen that they've happened, I'll usually just step back because often that's all you're going to get out of it. And the market then is quieting down as it closes. So I tend to just avoid it around closing time. Sometimes there'll be a nice big move, usually if it's been quiet for the day up until that point. But I tend to find that it's just easier to sit out altogether and do my post-market analysis at this point, go over my trades, do any of that analysis and any prep for the next day as well, draw on key levels, etc. But also, as I mentioned before, the US30, the companies that make it up, release their earnings every quarter. And sometimes, especially if they're the big companies like Apple and Nvidia, they tend to release their earnings after the markets close. So you want to be aware of what days those are, because you'll find that the market is going to move differently on those days. It's going to move differently whilst the market's open as it anticipates that news. Sometimes it can almost be impossible to trade on those days during the session. And then you'll see this huge move at around 9 p.m. UK time, which is around 4 p.m. Eastern time. And that is the market reacting to the news. So often what you'll get then is actually a big tradable move during Tokyo and London the next day. So it's really good to be aware of when the earnings reports are being released. Are they being released before the market's open? Are they being released after it's closed? And to expect the market to act differently on those days.
So now you understand the key times of day for trading the US30 in the New York session. As always, with any new information or anything that you're going to add to your trading plan, you always want to test it on a trading simulator or a demo account first. So Thinkmarkets has a great trading simulator. It's called the Trader's Gym. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a little thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to Thinkmarkets now as well.